It is now my great pleasure to announce today's commencement speaker. When a dean thinks about the first commencement speaker on his or her watch, he wants to make it count. So I thought hard about what kind of speaker we should have as our commencement speaker today. But it didn't take me long to settle on who it should be. Dr. Judith Rodin is a pioneer in higher education, philanthropy, and the world of policy. She embodies sustainability thinking and outcomes. She is the border crosser that I exhorted the graduates to be, and she is nothing if not bold. Dr. Rodin currently serves as the president of the Rockefeller Foundation, one of the world's leading philanthropic organizations. While at the helm, she has turned a venerable institution into a dynamic and innovative one. She has been a pioneer and innovator throughout her career and was the first woman named to lead an Ivy League institution as president of the University of Pennsylvania, and the first woman to serve as president of the Rockefeller Foundation. Dr. Rodin has a publications record to make any academics envious. Everybody, take note. And her most recent book on resilience literally defines the field, something she has done many times before. But it is her personal qualities that I want to highlight. Dr. Rodin is a visionary. She picks the right issues way ahead of the curve: green revolution in Africa, impact investing, resilience. It's a very long list. She is an innovator, introducing new ideas and conceptual frameworks to communities that need them desperately. And she has literally transformed every institution that she has touched. She is a leader. She takes tough decisions and moves things forward. I witnessed this in one case, the case of maternal and child health. While at the United Nations, I had to build an eminent persons group from around the globe to see how we could perform better to prevent maternal deaths and child deaths. Dr. Rodin gave the group an intellectual foundation to build on, creative ideas, and resources, human, financial, and political, to make it happen. 5 years on, the Every Woman, Every Child initiative that she helped to build is an unstoppable coalition of countries, companies, philanthropies, academics, and activists who have raised over $40 billion, billion with a B, for the cause, and literally bent the curve on maternal and child death. What we are told in policy schools is impossible. She did it, and we did it. But I think at this point, you want to hear from Dr. Rodin. May I introduce Dr. Judith Rodin.
Good afternoon. And Dionor, thank you for that warm introduction, and congratulations to you on finishing your freshman year as dean. It's actually been a thrill for me to watch you lead this institution, and I hope you're enjoying academia as much as I did. Let me also recognize your predecessor, who isn't here, on leave, Professor Don Kettle, whom I hired at the University of Pennsylvania and had the great pleasure of working with. I would say this school has a great knack for picking deans. Class of 2015, thank you so much for the honor of sharing this special day with you. It's wonderful to be in College Park today and be with your appropriately beaming families and friends and loved ones. I see a lot of proud faces out there. And what a beautiful concert hall this is. I understand that in the last few days, this stage at the Clarice has been graced by a philharmonic, a symphony orchestra, and even the President's own U.S. Marine Band. The good news for all of you is that I won't be singing or playing an instrument today. The truth is, I'd be afraid to invite the kind of reaction that George Bernard Shaw once memorably gave. The famous playwright was listening to a particularly mediocre orchestra when the conductor recognized Shaw in the audience and asked him what he would like them to play next. Shaw replied, "Dominoes." But standing in this gorgeous hall that's so often filled with beautiful song, I'm reminded of another line by another writer, Khalil Gibran. In fact, this university has a chair endowed in his name. Gibran wrote a collection of poems called The Prophet that was enormously popular the year I graduated from college. I know what you're thinking, and no, despite how very long ago that might have been, the Gibran chair is not part of the ancient history department. The passage of his that struck me and has really stayed with me all these years is one I often think about at ceremonies like this, because it's about farewells and future reunions. Gibran wrote, "If in the twilight of memory we should meet once more, we shall speak together again, and you shall sing to me a deeper song. Graduates, you will reconnect in future years, and when you do, you will share with one another even more thoughtful ideas, informed by new experiences. You will sing to one another even deeper songs." I know that this is not your first degree or first graduation, and for some it won't be your last, but I believe that today's might be the most important. After all, you came to College Park with a thirst for solving problems and a faith in public policy's ability to do that. The master's degrees and the doctorates that you're receiving today, the fruits of years of focused study, reflect a commitment deep inside you to fix what's broken. I'm grateful for that. You give me hope, because if there's anything that's broken, if there's anything that calls urgently for your expertise, your creativity, and your foresight, it is the way we produce public policy today. And I'm not just talking about what's broken a half an hour south of here, in the gridlock of Capitol Hill. I'm also talking about what's broken a half an hour north of here, in the neighborhoods of Baltimore. What menaces our society far more than craven opportunists is the fact that too many are still left craving opportunity. And what Baltimore has reminded the world in the last month is that this is where public policy is failing. The late and I know greatly missed Dr. John Steinbrenner drew on his work here in cognitive psychology to explore how policymakers make decisions in the face of uncertainty. He knew that policies that led to both conflict and collaboration were at their core about interpersonal relations. And public policy, like we're seeing today in the debate about Baltimore, follows human nature, in that it is often, too often, reactive. Of course, we need our policies and our policymakers to be responsive to the public. But there is a difference between being responsive and being reactive. What we need from you, in whatever realm of public policy you pursue, are ideas that are proactive and predictive. That's what Baltimore has taught us, and not only here. It's what we learned in Ferguson, in Oakland, in Paris, and on throughout the world. Often it takes a shock, such as the death of a young African-American man in the custody of the police, or an outbreak of a disease like Ebola that kills thousands and brings entire nations to their knees, or the devastation after 2 deadly earthquakes in Nepal. When these singular events happen, and they are really coming with increasing frequency and force, they reveal long-ignored structural flaws, many of which are derived from flawed or missing policies. And if we're paying attention, we'll notice that those fault lines often foretell the challenges of the future. So how then can policy stay one step ahead of the next crisis? But more than that, how can good policy prevent disruptions from becoming disasters? How can it improve opportunity for more people in more places? I believe there are 2 ways to do that: by building greater resilience and by building more inclusive economies. And I believe that in order to get there, you, the next generation of policy thinkers, need to ask yourselves 4 key questions to stay ahead of the curve. The first is this: ask yourself, in a diverse, changing, and complex world, does this policy promote and enable greater inclusion? The tragic events in Baltimore, in Ferguson, in Oakland didn't create a problem in the United States. They merely exposed one, or rather several of them. A fellow Maryland student, sophomore Max On, wrote in the Diamondback this month that these recent riots challenged, in his words, generations of systemic racism, inescapable cycles of poverty, and the inequity in our modern justice system. I think Max nailed it. What we see in too many American cities reveals the festering sores of the underbelly of American society, sores of unequal access to opportunity that surely threaten our future as a democracy. But if we address only the immediate issues of race or crime or policing, we are losing a critical opportunity to reimagine more broadly our cities, our communities, indeed our country for the 21st century. It is no coincidence, for example, that here and throughout the world, health, income, and mobility are highly correlated. These are the kinds of problems we can see long before a young man dies in police custody. And if they are problems we can see, then they are problems you can fix. This isn't a new challenge here. As we approach the 10th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, we're reminded that the story of New Orleans wasn't just about a storm. It was about the stability or instability of a society. Behind the levees were poor policies, poor people, and poorly designed systems, a lack of jobs, and a lack of leadership. When the levees broke, those problems floated to the surface. Like Baltimore, they couldn't be ignored any longer. After the floods, thousands fled. But today, thousands are flocking back to a renewed New Orleans, a city that's taking care to build in a more resilient and inclusive way, especially for the communities historically denied opportunity. After the floods and devastation, New Orleans created a policy framework, a new one, that allowed it to transform its public education system, to diversify its economy, and to re-engineer its neighborhoods. Today, it is re-emerging as a great American city. Don't get me wrong, New Orleans still has a lot of work to do, but it's proving that building resilience is not about building back the way we were before. We can't restore what made us vulnerable in the first place. We need policies that help us build back better, not just our physical infrastructure, but always our economic and our social foundations as well. Let me give you another example from another part of the world, of a city that's already reaping the dividends of policies that focused on producing social cohesion. Medellin, Colombia used to be synonymous with drugs, poverty, and crime. For decades, its policies were all about policing and punishment. But a new mayor and a new focus on innovation and collaboration has led to a policy approach that prioritized economic development and social inclusion. These policies connected the poorest and most vulnerable communities which were isolated in the hillside slums above town, isolated from the valley below, and it connected them to the valley, which was the economic and social core of the city. How did they do that? In this poor city with an average annual temperature of around 72 degrees, they built gondolas like the ones you'd see in a fancy ski town. Then they built escalators into the steepest hillsides to reach the people, the most disconnected people, that even the gondolas couldn't reach. And at the transit stops that dotted this new transportation system, they built health clinics and daycare centers. This new system became the connective tissue that brought people together, that integrated an economy, and a society. The results speak for themselves. In 10 years, the former murder capital of the world has seen its crime rate drop 90%. And today it's home to a massive tourism boom. It all happened because policymakers started by asking the question, are there new policy approaches that would promote inclusion and do it in a different way? But here's the catch. Before they could begin, policymakers in Medellin had to fully understand what was holding the city back. What was the real root cause of the problem? Only then could they create transformative policies. And that's the second question that good forward-thinking public policy must answer. How can we make sure we are fully aware of the problems and then solve them together in a more integrated, holistic way? It's a simple concept. Of course, you have to know what's wrong before you can fix it. It might sound obvious, but it's actually harder than it sounds because the answer can change day to day or year to year. Today, technology makes a lot of things simpler, but the rate of change also makes the problems you're called upon to solve a lot more complex. So it can be quite difficult to stay on top of all the potential vulnerabilities, all the potential threats, whether they're natural or structural or social. Having and using accurate real-time information is key to awareness. More than ever, policymakers will need to benefit from tools and technologies that will help you make informed decisions, even as conditions change in real time. Let me give you one example. It comes from a startup in Silicon Valley called Planet Labs, which is launching sophisticated and inexpensive satellites into space that give us a new perspective into old problems. Traditional satellite technology only takes pictures of small areas of land, like you're kind of looking through a straw. But these satellites capture wide swaths of it, giving us glimpses of changes in the Earth's surface over time. And they've already made incredible discoveries that can help policymakers in important ways. They detected that an entire Brazilian neighborhood was secretly razed before the World Cup. They identified the areas in Africa most susceptible to Ebola as it was starting to spread. They predicted where a hurricane would hit, which allowed insurance checks to reach the residents in harm's way before the storm ever made landfill. So gathering information in new ways, increasing your awareness, is going to be an important part of the equation. But it's not worth much unless it's shared, and this is where integration comes in. I think I'm standing right now in a spot normally reserved for a conductor, and just like he or she would tell you, I believe we have to all be playing off the same song sheet. Local and federal, city and rural, private and public, global and local. Increasingly, the policies that will succeed are the ones that allow for information to flow freely from all stakeholders, from the UN Secretary General, who you saw last week, down to the local sheriff. It allows us to work from the same song sheet. The seamless exchange of information will indeed be a break from previous practice. It will require of you new ways of working together. It will require innovation. And that's the next question you must ask to stay ahead of the curve. How can we take the principles of innovation and apply them to policymaking? For too long, implementing public policy has been like launching satellites in the old way. By the time we've spent decades of research and billions of dollars to get that satellite into space, the technologies on the ground have already rendered it obsolete. What's true in the stratosphere is true in our capitals. 20th century approaches can no longer be used to solve 21st century problems. One of the ways the Rockefeller Foundation has been pursuing innovation is through labs that never lose sight of the end user. In the private sector, they're called R&D labs, where they try, for example, to build a self-driving car. But in the public sector, We call them social innovation labs, where we try to solve a pressing global problem. We bring together policymakers and stakeholders of all stripes, the usual suspects you'd expect, some strange bedfellows you wouldn't, but always with the end user, the citizen. And it's catching on. Google is getting in the game and opening its first government innovation labs this summer. They'll work with policy leaders in 2 communities in the Bay Area and try to come up with innovative policy solutions for problems like economic development and emergency preparedness. The novel approach in these labs is that they begin with the beneficiaries, and they allow policies to be designed around their needs, their motivations, and their circumstances, rather than top-down policies that might look good on paper, but may be tone-deaf to real people. Now, you all know it's not enough just to design smart policies on paper. Of course you know that they have to work in practice. But sometimes, I argue, that's not enough. People have to feel that they're working. So the fourth and final question a successful public policy must answer is, how is it perceived by real people? It's not enough anymore to see data that show increases in life expectancy, for example. We have to make sure that the people who are living longer are feeling the quality of those years. It's not enough if the numbers eventually say our criminal justice systems are reducing crime without also asking, will minorities and young people feel safer, or just their older white neighbors? Will everyone feel that his or her life matters? Graduates, when you leave here, you are going to lead revolutions in so many different areas of public policy: environment and energy, international development and international security, public and private sector. You'll lead at local, national, regional, and global levels. But what the policies you create will need to have in common is that they must promote inclusion. They must increase awareness and share information through greater integration. People must feel that they improve their daily lives. And above all, they must be more predictive than reactive. Think of the major problems that policymakers have been asked to solve in recent years: too few jobs, too many barriers to healthcare, climate vulnerabilities that rise with temperatures and sea levels, tensions that drive terrorism, and threats that drive us to war. But in a cycle in which we're often answering today's challenges tomorrow, this norm simply doesn't work. We have to answer tomorrow's challenges today. It's true that no one gets credit for averting disasters. If you follow this path, your biggest victories might not make headlines, but you'll be keeping bad news off the front pages. We've gotten very good at recognizing those who solve problems. I believe we must get better at celebrating the leaders who predict, preempt, and prevent those problems. And I, for one, hope deeply that you will be those leaders. You must be the ones who will sing a different, deeper song, a song that will bring much-needed harmony to the discordant days ahead. Thanks to you, we can do more than fix what needs fixing. We can, as Hemingway wrote, be stronger at the broken places. Congratulations, class of 2015. I commend to you our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rodin, for those inspiring words, but even more for modeling it. You didn't just tell us to do it, you're actually doing it. So thank you for setting the example for our students. I have a feeling you'll be seeing a lot of them in the future in exactly the areas that you are pioneering. So thank you. we wanted to leave the president of the Rockefeller Foundation a humble little Chesapeake turtle, who doesn't look so humble, and a gift basket for this wonderful commencement address. Thank you.
So much.